Hello, and welcome to Conversations Worth Your While, a show in which I chat with really cool people about interesting topics to spark, inspire, and motivate personal and professional change. And today's topic is healing tough times through creativity. This conversation is worth your while if you'd love to deal with tough times in a way that fulfills you. And so, what we're going to do today is we're going to share our stories. We're going to share how we've each used creativity in very different ways to heal. And we'll leave you with a few things that you can do right now to start your healing using creativity. So let's start with some intros. I'm Linda Bucher. I'm a heart centered master coach and a mindset mentor, a transformative speaker, and an author. And if you are excited about making a positive impact on the world and you feel that there's this bigness inside of you that you know you're meant to share, and if you want to do more and be more and have more joy, more fun, more balance, and more impact, then you're going to want to connect with me because I will help you to get out of your own way, to get clear, to lighten your load, and focus your energy and gifts in a meaningful way. And today uh, I have the pleasure of being joined by Janna Willoughby-Lohr of PaperCraft Miracles. And Janna, I want to thank you for being here, and I would hope that you could give us a little bit more information about what you do and who you do it for.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I am Janna, and my company is called PaperCraft Miracles. It's an eco-friendly handmade paper art company. We make magical things out of paper that make people happy and bring meaning to their lives. I am also a poet and a musician and an activist and a mom of three and many, many other things because I can't stop creating things. And I started my company when I was in college and have been making crafty things for people professionally for over 20 years. And I love sharing with people. I love affecting positive change in the world and helping people to think differently when they're experiencing trouble. And I think my main goal in life and through my business and everything that I share is all about helping people to foster communication, because in this digital age that we live in, where everything is an email or a text message or a Facebook post, it can be really hard to have those face-to-face, real conversations, and to admit to people that everything isn't perfect and doesn't have that gorgeous filter on it, like on Instagram, right? So I want to help people be real and to communicate things that are hard. So
That's beautiful. Really nice. Yeah, I always say, I told my kids, and I tell a lot of people about this, that when you're looking at social media, the tendency is to compare your insides with their outsides. And that's not really a fair comparison because they've got insides that are feeling the same, having the same, they're experiencing tough times in their own way, but they just don't want to show that because that feels very vulnerable and unsafe. So they're going to show you what they want you to see and how they want to feel as well. That's what they're projecting out there. So that's interesting. But why don't we talk a little bit about tough times, right? We have tough times that every human goes through really tough times. And you and I have very different stories um, of our tough times and how we each used creativity to heal those tough times. So I'm going to let you start with a little bit of a story about some of the tough times that you would like to share. And it's such a beautiful example of being vulnerable, since we just mentioned that. So share as much as you would like to share, and then we'll talk about how that you actually healed. We'll do that separately through creativity.
awesome. So I'm going to do like the super condensed short version of this.
Okay.
When I first went away to college, I went there to be a writer, and I took a bunch of elective classes my freshman year, learning to bind books and make paper and make artist books that integrate the text and the materials and how it opens and how you interact with it all to one bigger concept or a bigger idea. And I had finally found this way to integrate all of my love for musical elements and poetry and sharing with people and visual art and paper crafting all into one. And I was like, this is my jam. I want to do this. I got to the end of my year. I met with my college advisor and I said, hey, these are all the classes I took. What major am I working toward? And he said, those are all electives, so nothing. And I was like, well, shit, like, what am I supposed to do now? And because he's amazing, he said, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be an artist and I don't want to be broke. How do I do that?
Ah.
And he said, you should do that as your major. And they had a major called integrative studies. And I made up my own major and I integrated entrepreneurial business and creative art together as one major and learned how to make money with art and spent 4 years doing that. In the middle of all of that wealth of creative like planning for my future, like, oh yay, I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to make money, I'm going to do all these great things. It was super, super fun. In the middle of all that, my mom died on Friday the 13th, like 3 weeks into the first semester of my junior year. And all of a sudden I was this instantaneous adult. I had inherited a house back in Buffalo and I was going to college in North Carolina, like 800 miles away. And the house was falling apart and needed tons of work. And I had no money and no nothing, and still had another year and a half of school left to do in another state in a very specialized major. And then 4 months after my mom died, my dorm burnt to the ground with all of my stuff in it, including all my journals for my whole entire life since I was 5, like everything I'd ever written ever, toast, on her birthday.
Wow.
And then they cut my financial aid for the rest of my school, while I was like owning a home because they wouldn't qualify me as an adult. And my dorm fire happened like Saturday night, between Saturday and Sunday, and the new semester was supposed to start on Monday. So I was like supposed to go to class, and all of a sudden, not only did I have no stuff, but I had nowhere to live. Like, if the dorm was like to the ground, unlivable forever.
Wow.
Everything I owned was ashes. And I was like, well, now what? Now what? And I looked at my roommate. Everyone survived the fire, which is really the most important thing, right? Everyone was alive. And I looked at my roommate and I just started cracking up. And I was like, dude, all of our shit burned up. And we started like rolling around on the ground, like laughing like insane people. And I just looked at her and I was like, my mom would have been 55 today. And not only did she die very young at 54, but I just kept thinking, like, 5 is my lucky number. And 55 is 2 luckies, right? 1 is super obvious, like me and everyone else who was in that building, over 100 people in this old wooden building, got out of there and survived, and only 1 person was injured, and it wasn't life-threatening, right? So obviously that's number 1, 5. And I kept thinking, like, what is the second one? What is the second one? And I grew up my mom was a hoarder, and I didn't know that had a title until I was an adult and I saw that show Hoarders, and that's like a story for another day. But living in that situation as a kid and growing up with a mom whose things were so important to her, the material aspects, and like, I might need that someday, I might need that someday. And then at 20 years old, having all of those things that I thought were really important just evaporate, like literally toast. I kept thinking, like, how am I lucky now? And like on the 3rd day after the fire, they always say, like, on the 3rd day, crazy things happen, right? And so on the 3rd day, it just dawned on me that my mom was sending me a message, sending me this lesson that she'd never learned in her whole life, that you don't need any of that stuff. Even your poems from when you were a kid, all those ways you try to explain yourself to yourself, you don't need any of that. All of those material things don't matter at all, because you survive. All you need is your life keeping you warm. You really only need 5 things, right? You need food, you need water, you need shelter, you need someone who loves you, and something that drives you, and that's it. Everything else is just cake. And so I got to learn all of that by the time I was 20 years old, before I could legally even drink booze. That was my life. And I was no longer a kid, it was like an overnight thing. Like, you are an adult now, get your shit together. And like, that's been my life for the last 20 years. It's like, what do I do now after that?
Right.
How do I heal from that and in a way that helps other people?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've spent my life doing.
Wow. What what
That's
an
the short version.
amazing version, and that's the short version. That's really amazing. It just before we're even going to any of the other things we're talking about today, it's inspiring to see you now because I know a little bit now about all the things that you've been doing, and it's very inspiring that um, everyone's going through really tough times. We always have, and we probably always will. You are exemplifying like with when it all hits, especially even almost all at the same time, that you drew on an inner strength that you probably didn't even know you had. That's one of the things I tell people all the time. Like you have an inner strength that you don't even know about until you're called to use it. I don't think that the tough times make you stronger. I think they show you how strong you are. And you have exemplified that very beautifully. And we'll talk a little bit about how you've done that through creativity in a few minutes. Um, I was not nearly as young when I needed to step up and heal myself. Um, I endured, that's the word I use, for decades uh, because um, the hardships didn't come all at one time. So my story starts with frequently being bullied, like in the way that you see in the movies during middle school, sixth grade, then middle school, then high school. And so when you get beaten down like that by other people who are picking on you for no apparent reason, you start to, it really um, punctuates your own personal belief that there must be something wrong with you. You just must be not right or something, and you're not enough, right? So I went the cerebral route of proving myself. That's what I did. I had to prove myself for most of my life. I had to hustle for my worth. And I had my dad's example was he was always very self sufficient and he just relied on himself. When my parents got married, he didn't have, he maybe had an I don't know, like an associate's degree maybe. And he just kept working his way up the ladder and he kept going to night school. He went to night school until I was like, I don't even know, 14 years old or something. He just kept going to night school, getting another degree, getting a master's degree, um, and getting better and better jobs and relying on himself. And then I got to see the fruits of his labor was we had a night, we got to buy a nicer house. We got a nicer car, um, and he kept doing. Then he joined the country club and then he got a nicer car, then he built even a nicer house and just kept watching this. And that's what success was supposed to be like for me. And the whole time I was smart. I was a computer programmer, I worked in marketing, I went the corporate route, and I too was following in his footsteps up that ladder. And I can be in a nicer house, I can drive a nicer car now. And the whole time I didn't think I was creative at all. Um, and during all those years of all that corporate climbing and whatever, um, I um, I was unable to have children, so I ended up having to adopt, and I adopted my three children from Russia. So that took some time, but it was also very overwhelming because even just being infertile and losing the babies that I had been carrying, there was a lot of emotion with that. I had to undergo chemotherapy. Um, I like there was just a lot, and my husband was an alcoholic, and that made life very difficult because I had to hide it from people, right? And, well, I thought I had to, I was taking that responsibility for his disease, right? And then there was, many things I had to do on my own, and it was very hard. And then when my kids were 3, 5, and 7, my husband just didn't wake up one day. So now I'm a sudden widow, a sudden single mom with 3 grieving children. And so it just kept coming at me. So mine wasn't like all at once, it was over decades, but it was relentless. There was always something. Um, and, finally, I, there's always like what do you call that? A catalyst that just, that's it. That's all, that's the end of this, right? So my catalyst was actually physical. My body was telling me, you got to stop. You got to just stop right now. So I had back and neck pain 24/7, and it was so bad I could only sleep for about 15 minutes at a time before I'd wake up in pain. My gallbladder wasn't working. They wanted to take it out. It was like working at about 25% capacity. They wanted to take that out. I was just my jaw, everything. It was just everything. I was a mess. And that was my body catching up, because when we experience trauma, it we internalize it and it's in our body somewhere. And that trauma needs to release in some way. So, well, today we're talking about how we each use creativity in some ways to heal and also release that trauma that we internalize. So, I'd love if you would share with us how you did that.
For sure. So like I said, I love making these artist books, which was like my answer to the way to integrate all the things that I really love to do. And so in the middle of like losing my mom and then losing all of my stuff and like kind of trying to find, what's the next step? What do you do? How do you survive? Right? Because the creative part is not, and the strong part is not having things happen to you. It's what the hell are you going to do next? Right? I mean, any number of these things that had happened to anybody else, like one of these things could have been like life ruiner, right? And I was like, you know what? I get to go to school and focus and study on exactly what I love. I'm 20 years old. And I was like, my mom died at 54. And so I just kept thinking, like, I've got 34 years, right? I've got 34 years. What can I do with it? And I was like, I don't want to wait until, I'm a real adult, right? Until I start really doing what I love. And I'm going to start doing it right now. And so through this major that I had created, I knew that I wanted to do something creative and somehow make money off art. And I knew that I would have to start some kind of business to do that, which is why I was taking all these entrepreneur classes. But in the middle of all this, I stopped thinking about the money. And I started thinking about, how am I going to survive? Because that was so much more important, right? And I went into the art studio and I started making all these books, and I started writing all these poems about my mom and about losing all my things. Also, right in the middle of this, I had met this guy who was like the one, right? The love of my life. And he was in the military. And the same day that the fire happened, he got shipped out to Germany. So that was like the end for us forever. So right in the middle of this, I'm like utterly heartbroken in every way that you could be, broken open, right? And I started making all of these artist books, integrating the visuals that were triggering me and dealing with, my family, which is a whole other episode, which we talked a little bit about earlier. My family is wild. And learning from all of the broken relationships around me, learning from all of the traumatic things I've been through, and saying, what kind of adulthood do I want to build for myself? Because right now I got nothing. And, people say, like, when you hit rock bottom, that's where it starts. And that's where I was. Like, I was definitely thinking, like, well, I've lost my mom. I lost all my shit. Where's the cancer and the bus that's coming to hit me? Because I'm waiting, like, that's going to happen. And I started like expecting horrible things, so that when good things happen, I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I'll take that. And so I started putting together these books of my mom's relationship with me. And I remember when she was alive thinking that she was never going to be able to meet my kids because she was not a healthy person. And I think I was like 14 the first time I knew that she would never meet my kids. And so I put this book together about how before I was born, she and I were like united, like the egg that made me was part of her and part of my grandmother, and back and back and back, right? All this generational trauma that I started thinking about. And once I was born, like, we were these two separate individuals, but we were still kind of connected in the middle. And then she died, and we were like back being one, like all the energy that made her live was like part of me. And so like I made this book that was these two separate sides that were literally connected in the center. And so like, this is her before, this is us together, this is me now. And like that we have this push and this pull where we're more than two, like we're more than one individual, but we're less than two separates, right? So I started making that book, and I made a book about my family tree and how I have 7 brothers and sisters, but I'm an only child, right? I'm not going to get into that because it's crazy. And I made these, like all these books about this traumatic things I was dealing with, and telling the story of my life and sharing, this is where I came from, but here's where I am now. And that's where I want to go. And showing these books to other people, and they would cry. And as this one day I showed these books to somebody, and they're crying after looking at them. And they said, I didn't even know that I had stuff to deal with until I saw this. And not only do I know about it now, but like I'm broke open, you know, like I'm dealing with that. And that I healed not only myself by making these books, but I learned that I could heal other people by sharing them. And, you know, meanwhile, I'm like 20, 21 years old and been out in my world healing people in the way that I was healing myself. And so, you know, after that, I was like, well, if I'm going to create a business, that's what I want to do. It's not just about like, oh, I'm going to make journals, or I'm going to make stationery, I'm going to make cards and I'm going to sell them. But why? Why am I going to do that? And I'm going to make money doing that because it helps people.
That's
and that's what I do.
So beautiful.
That's all I've done. You know, like I don't focus on the money part because, you know, it comes, the money comes. Yeah. It's all, for me, it's like just seeing someone's reaction when something that I made with my hands affects the way they think about life forever. You know, it's like that single moment, you know, we've all had those one moments, that one conversation that breaks you open, that takes your mind and goes, whoop, and you're like, wow, I don't think that way anymore. I think like this. And just the way that you can affect change in the one person, and then they affect change everywhere that they go. You know, like,
I love your story. I love how you, I mean, it's so beautiful because, and I'll share my story because it's a different way of doing the exact same thing, healing myself, and through that healing, finding a way to help others heal. So we've each done that in a very different way. And I think everybody can do that. When you heal yourself, you now have an experience that you can help others through. Like you can use that experience to help other people, and you're doing it through your artist books back then. So with me, like I said, I was following my dad's footsteps. My mom was a piano teacher, and she always did what she loved. But what she loved, brought her enough money to survive, no problem, and have nice things, But it wasn't like the loud, noisy country club, fancy brand new car every 3 years. It wasn't that. And I never noticed, right? But then when I had those physical symptoms, it was all a culmination of all the healing that I needed to do as well. So I had a cottage. We had some rental property out in Sunset Bay. And we rented them out when my husband was alive. But once he died, it just got to be way too hard for me to upkeep 5 cottages with the rentals every week and go in and out in 2 hours and clean them all and keep it all organized. So I sold 3 of them, and 2 were on another property that I kept, and we were going to maybe use it for ourselves and our family. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. I don't have him anymore, but I'm going to do this and just bring the kids here every weekend. And I never thought of myself as a creative person. I could do a spreadsheet like you wouldn't believe. I could program computers like you wouldn't believe. I'm a business strategist. I have a master's degree in business. I was all cerebral all the way, in the corporate world for like 27 years. But here's what happened with this cottage. My healing happened through me designing the space, the interior spaces. I remodeled the kitchen, and I drew on some artistry I never knew was inside me. And it was amazing and beautiful. I did the bathroom, and it was amazing and beautiful. things occurred to me. Oh, drop those soffits, put some lights over here. Oh, the backsplash is going to be pebbles, because I was creating I didn't want that quintessential lighthouse cottage. Like, to me, that's too cliche. So I wanted to make a garden on the inside, and all the colors of the walls were sunset colors. And I had like a bird bath with a bunch of candles in it as a side table, and I would light all the candles at all different heights. But the bird bath was the outside element. I brought all these outside elements in, and I'm like, I don't know where the inspiration came from. I don't know where the creativity came from, because prior to that, when I would try to design a room in my house, I would put something down, and then I would look at it. I'm like, that looks like I just put it there and it's waiting to go where it's supposed to be, because it's not supposed to be there. It doesn't look right. And I never could design well. I just didn't have it. But then here, this creativity came out, and people would be like, your cottage is amazing. Who designed it? I'm like, just me. It just came from inside me. And as I was doing it, I was healing. I kept healing and I kept healing, and so it was a physical manifestation of my healing, and that I wanted that, to feel that peace of being in a beautiful garden, and I created that around me and for my kids, for me and for my children. So it was so much healing. It was a very beautiful thing. And then all of a sudden, I started playing my piano again. I was a musician, and I, took lessons for like 11 years, and I was very good by the time I went to college, like very, very good. Um, but I was on the cerebral path. I'm going to college for business and computer programming. I'm not going for music. That's not the loud example that I had. Like, I'll just be a piano player. But then life got in the way, and I wouldn't play my piano except for Christmas carols every year. That's it. 11 months would go by, I wouldn't touch the thing. And so all of a sudden now, here I am in this healing, and I decide to quit my 6-figure a year job. And because that physical, I just couldn't physically take it, and I knew something had to give. So it was that. And I started playing my piano all the time, and I started letting that creativity come out. And then I bought some wire, and I bought some beads, and I started making jewelry for people. Did I watch any videos, or no? I'll figure it out. I got to be creative. So all this creativity came out of me that I never even knew was there. But all of it was healing and getting to know who I am now. And so that's how I ended up releasing that trauma in healing. But it also led to me going to school to become a life coach, and then a master life coach, and certifying, because the person I found was a person who's a healer. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help people, to help the world. So I'm here to light the way for those who are lighting the way. Like, I know this for sure. So I use creativity in a different way, because I didn't even know I had it. You knew you had it. I didn't even know I had it. So, I was about 45 years old when I started, like, letting me know that part of myself. So we each have really unique and different stories. So let's just leave our audience with a few things that they can do right now to start their healing using creativity, even if they don't identify as a creative.
So for me, like, the heart of everything creative comes with storytelling. And for me, I started telling the story of my life by writing poems when I was very, very little. And sorry, my little baby's right here, and she might get a little fussy. She's been sleeping for a long time. So I started telling the story of my life, which is crazy. I know this from day one, right? And people started telling me I had to write a book when I was 5, right? So I started doing poetry. And for a lot of people, telling the story of something that's horrible that happened to them, something traumatic, something difficult, sharing that with people, being vulnerable, for most people is very hard. But for a lot of people, writing poems about them are ways to start telling the story without telling everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps you to kind of tell the story to yourself, and like that it's not happening to you because you're telling it as like second person or third person, right? Mm-hmm. This horrible thing happened to those people, but it's not me. And you can write about things that have happened to you with no intention of ever sharing them to anyone else, right? Because that's the part that freaks most people out, is having to like share they're the moments they didn't succeed with somebody else, to share all the, the ways that they didn't do it right, the ways that someone hurt them, and to relive that, right? So I think for a lot of people, releasing your expectations of creativity, right? Because people, you go on Instagram, whatever, Facebook, and you see somebody who's a quote unquote artist or a writer, like sharing their creations out there, and you expect that everything that you make creatively has to be perfect. And so I'd say that, like the best advice I can have for anyone who is trying to figure out what's next, how to grow while it's raining, right? Because a huge portion of life is a thunderstorm. Like that crap is going to rain on you every single day. Somehow something is going to happen, right? Yeah. So in the middle of all that, what you can do is like release all of your expectations of what's not going to work, and just make something.
Yeah.
Get a pen, draw a scribble drawing. Like if you're really mad, scribble on a piece of paper. It is scientifically proven that it will make you feel better.
Yeah.
To scribble on a piece of paper. I'm letting it show. That's the real life back there. So you know what I mean? Like just figure some way to let it out. Go to karaoke.
Yeah.
Go to karaoke in a place you've never been before, and it's all strangers. They don't know you. Who cares, right? Figure out a way to let those parts of you out and tell that story in a way that's you telling the story to yourself, and start there. Like art doesn't need to be perfect. Like don't be afraid that it has to be perfect. Honestly, the coolest things I've ever made in my entire life, I fucked up on them, and then I patched over the part that was fucked up, and it was better because the patch looked cooler than it did initially.
Right.
And I've been thinking about that a lot this whole past year and a half, that some of the best gardens in life are things that are not planned. Some of the best artwork that you make is something that it turns out in a way that you didn't intend it to look at all or to sound at all. The coolest songs, sometimes you leaned on the keyboard funny and it made a weird chord, and you're like, you know what? That's the one that connects to that pain.
Right.
And you just never know when that's going to happen. So, let go of the perfection, let go of that. Make something creative with your hands, with your voice, with your body, dance, you know what I mean? Like do something, move around, live in your body, enjoy the fact that you exist in some way, find some way to enjoy your existence. And that's all that matters, because people are gonna, it's like stage fright is one of the biggest fears in the world. It's like the number one thing that people are afraid of is getting up in front of people and bearing their soul. And when I was 12, my mom saw these poems that I had been writing about being bullied, because that happened to me too. And she was like, these are fantastic. You got to go read these at an open mic. And I was like, hell I do. No, everyone in school hates me. Whoa, what am I going to do? And she was like, go to this open mic and come with me and share these poems. And I did. And the first time I got up in front of people, I was holding my paper and it was shaking like crazy, right? And I read the first poem, all adults in the audience, meanwhile. And everyone in the audience got up and started clapping. And honestly, that is the best medicine that there is getting claps from other people when you're vulnerable. When you didn't think it was going to matter to anyone, when you didn't think you were going to succeed, and it's like all those people in the audience are afraid to be up there. They're all afraid to be up there. And they're going to clap for you because clapping makes people feel awesome. And they're like, whoa, I wish I could do that. You know what I mean? Like, you got to remember that all the people out in your audience either are afraid to be doing what you're doing, are afraid that they could never do what you're doing, or wish they could be you.
They're inspired. Yeah.
Even the people who seem to be haters, You know, haters gonna hate, potatoes gonna potate. Like, I don't have time for that, right? And you don't either. Anyone who's listening out there, you don't either. You know, create because it's good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have movement in your life because it's good for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sing real super loud in your kitchen because it's good for you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I love that you brought up so many different ways to be creative. So for a person who thought she was only cerebral, and now I realize I'm just as creative as I am cerebral, um, that there's many different ways. And when we're children, we don't even think about creativity. We just do creative play. I mean, just watch a bunch of 5-year-olds. They're just making stuff up left and right, with reckless abandon. And that's how they're keeping themselves busy. And like, let's pretend this, let's pretend that. So there's so many different ways. I'm a very creative cook, right? So you wouldn't think of cooking as being artistic, but it's totally creative. Just making stuff up or adding some spices here or there, or looking at stuff and saying, what can I make with all these ingredients? That's a creative endeavor. We're a lot more creative than we think. So first of all, I would say find ways that you're naturally creative. And so it doesn't have to look like art or be considered art. Even if you're doing some art, like say you download a coloring book page and you just get out your colored pencils. You didn't make that drawing. Okay, you're just filling it in. But the colors that you feel like, the way you feel like filling it in, the colors that you choose, that's creative. Even if you didn't make the original base art of that coloring book page. Cooking, dancing, I love that. It's just dancing. We're not unless you're doing some pre-choreographed thing, you are creating while you're dancing. You're creating the movements. You're letting the music move your body, and as the songs change, you move in a different way if you just let it go. So having a little dance party, is a beautiful way to be creative. And it is all healing. There's just so many different ways. I feel like doing this Conversations Worth Your While is a creative endeavor for me. I get to learn things, and I just let it flow. Whatever comes out, comes out. And it's really about play. I remember my best friend is a fine artist. She is about as gifted as they come. Like, she has more talent in her tiny pinky finger than I can ever hope to have. She's so amazing. And we were somewhere with the kids, and she had collected. We went out in the wilderness, and we collected all these things, stones and rocks and just stuff like that. And we were making jewelry, and the kids just kept doing it. They were just like, oh, look at, I made this, I'm making this. And she was making her thing, and I just sat there, and I had been staring at it like, I don't know what to make. She says, you're not supposed to know what to make, just play. And once I played, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm making, just play. I played with rocks, I played with twine, I played with beach glass, and before I knew it, I had made a pendant. And then she looked over at mine. She goes, oh, I like yours better. Like, this is from a gifted artist, So give yourself permission to play. And through all those, we do heal. What doesn't heal us is holding it inside. So whether it's interior design, coloring book, playing with macaroni on a paper plate, making little things, like just play with your food. Like, it's all creative and it's all healing. So just let it out in some way. So this has been such an amazing conversation, Janna. Thank you so much for being on Conversations Worth Your While. So I know you have something that you'd like to share. You have a Facebook group, don't you, for moms. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So as a mompreneur, as you can see, my little one right here, this is Maven. I have 3 kids, and ever since I first had my first child and I was at home with my kid, I was like, how am I going to grow my business while I'm raising kids? Like, how am I ever going to do that? Right? Because parenting is hard, being a business owner is hard, and being both together is almost impossible, especially because, being a dadpreneur, not really the same as the mompreneur, right? Because moms run everything, and everyone better know that at this point. So I have been looking for a community of fellow mompreneurs who were holding it down at home and expected to hold it down in their companies and have the weight of the world on us and have to pretend like we actually are doing all of it, but really, we're living in a world of dry shampoo and dirty dishes, right? Like, so I couldn't find that community anywhere. And there's mom groups, there's business owner groups, but there weren't that many that overlap, right? So I decided to start my own Facebook group, and it is called Mamas and Entrepreneur. So MAMA''S Entrepreneur, real life community for women business owners who are moms on Facebook. And I'll send you the link so we can share it out with the show for the link to it.
I will share it.
So it's Mamas and Entrepreneur, as in Mama is an entrepreneur with the apostrophe.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I will definitely put the link to that into the description of today's show. So, awesome. Thank you so much. So, once again, I'm Linda Bucher, helping you to lighten your load and unleash that bigness inside of you and make an impact on the world while living a balanced, rewarding life. And I'd like to thank Janna Willoughby-Lohr of PaperCraft Miracles, as well as you, our audience, for sharing your time with me today. Please subscribe and remember to check the description where you'll find our contact information and the resources that we are gifting to you. And until next time, make sure you made this conversation worth your while by fueling the spark that it ignited.